All right.
All right.
We're ready to start episode 3. Definitely not take 3.
No, certainly not. We didn't have any technical difficulties at all.
We do this fluidly, first try, every time.
Without a hitch, every time. Yeah.
The first 2 podcasts we did, when we jumped in the podcast, there was 2 big blockbusters releasing, so we were immediately in the review game.
Yeah.
Reviewing Mission Impossible.
We just couldn't let those
Dead
2 movies
Reckoning,
pass.
Part 1.
Yeah.
Then Oppenheimer. And if we got any critiques about the podcast, it's people saying just, you talked about things we haven't seen yet.
I haven't even seen these movies yet. Yep.
And I said, that's fair. There's sort of an immediacy to what we were talking about.
Yes.
Or recency to it. And we said we should probably aim for a little more broad appeal in our next one. And so my idea was, since it's our first sort of general podcast, and even though right now probably the people listening to us know who we are, because the fan base hasn't grown yet.
Yet is the key word there.
We're not adored by millions yet.
It's coming. It just hasn't arrived to that point yet.
Yes. But we figured we'd do a little more of a get to know your host.
Get to know your host, movie likes and dislikes, and little movie history.
Exactly. And so I said, if we're going to do this the first time, well, let's do a podcast of first. Some of your first movie favorites, some of your first movie experiences. And so we're just going to sort of run through some different categories.
I'm really excited.
And I'm really curious how much content this will yield, because we'll be referencing a lot of movies, and I'm sure it will lead to a lot of rabbit trails discussing movies.
It'll probably be a miracle if this podcast has any focus at all. We'll just be all over the place.
It'll probably be a little more true to what our conversations are usually like revolving movies. But I'm excited about it because I just like the idea that we're going to get to bounce around and bring up so many different movies. It
was really fun after you texted me last night to even start to think about these questions, and it brought up different memories of movies I had forgotten I'd even seen in the movie theater. Not forgotten necessarily, but just hadn't thought about in a while. And your brain starts running about different movies, and it's a fun path to go down. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, and I figured where we would start is with just the most obvious first. And that's, sort of the first movie or movies that you loved, your first favorites when it comes to movies. And, I'm going to put this disclaimer. I was talking with Andy about this earlier. Because we're talking about first, we're talking about stuff when we were young. And there's a lot of them that I look back on and go, I don't know if I'm proud to admit a lot of these.
Sure.
But we're just going to own it. It is what it is. And
no regrets.
And I'll say this. People think of me as a movie snob because I am.
I was going to talk about that.
I admit that. But this was not always the case. I had no movie taste growing up. I loved everything.
Me too.
And until probably much later than should. I was probably in my 20s before I really started developing good taste. I mean, there were movies I loved in high school and in my college years that I look back on and go, those are not good movies that I really loved, but I just loved everything.
I have such a similar experience, but I don't look back and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I like that. I look back and I go, you know what? It's because I grew up in the 80s. I was born in 1980, and a lot of those movies from the 80s are not good. There's a lot of good movies in the 80s, but the ones I grew up on, some of the ones we're going to be talking about here soon, they're not good, but they're so fun. And they're fun to watch. And I was going to talk about this. I think if you start a movie podcast with someone, people are just going to assume that it's like, oh, my favorite movie is Citizen Kane and The Godfather. And I love all those, I love the movies that movie guys are supposed to love, but I love movies that maybe movie guys aren't supposed to love. And there's just something good about just watching a movie that isn't good, and you're just watching it because you just enjoy the movie. And it just doesn't matter sometimes if the movie's good or not, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Last time we podcasted, I went on a long ramble about how movies I compare to meals, different types of foods. And
I wouldn't call that a ramble. I would call that a great point that you made.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
But I think, liking all kinds of foods is a good thing. It's good to like pizza. Don't be a food snob that says, oh, pizza's some lesser form of
Sometimes
food.
You just need to order a pizza. Yeah.
All right, so let's jump into it then. Let's talk about what were your first favorites or favorite as movies.
Okay, you want me to go?
Yeah, I want you to go.
So I just grew up, like I said, I was born in 1980. So I just grew up, and I'm an only child, so it was me, my mom, my dad in my house. I just grew up, and HBO was just always on, which for, I assume you probably know what HBO is. If you're listening to this, it was just a movie channel on TV. There wasn't a fraction as many channels back then. There wasn't enough, near as much back then to occupy your mind. So if there was a movie on HBO and it was even somewhat decent, it had my attention. So I grew up watching Ghostbusters and Teen Wolf, which goes into exactly like what we were just talking about, where it doesn't matter if it's good or not. It's just fun to watch.
Teen Wolf might be the epitome of a movie that is objectively terrible, but subjectively wonderful.
Absolutely. Ghostbusters, Teen Wolf, Gremlins, Goonies, Beverly Hills Cop, Terminator, just those type of movies were on HBO, and so they were just always on in my house. And I was, looking back, you think you don't necessarily understand at the time, but I was absorbing those movies even sometimes without even realizing it. So it doesn't take long until you start to remember. Even as a young child, like Ghostbusters was one that really caught my attention early. Slimer and the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. And of course, at that age, you don't understand the jokes or the witty dialogue or the funny Bill Murray improvs, but the things that catch your eye. And all of a sudden you realize like, oh, I love this movie. And if it's on, it would stop me in my tracks from playing with my toys or doing whatever I was doing, and it would have my attention. So I don't know that it's, I'm talking about Ghostbusters, but a lot of movies fall into that category of just, I grew up, they were on TV all the time, and I just watched them. So, and it was a great time for that, of the, maybe it's not great, but it's really fun. Like Goonies is a good example of that. I don't think it's going to be on anybody's list of greatest movies ever made, but it's so fun to watch, and it's funny, and it's, just growing up with movies like that is my big memory, and just having these movies that were on a lot and would just always catch my attention no matter how many times I had seen them.
I think the first movie that I think of, and again, your memory kind of gets hazy when you're our age.
It does.
I'm going like, when did this come out? How old was I when I started watching this? But the first one, the earliest one I could remember for sure, like being a movie I was obsessed with, was the Transformers, the movie, the cartoon,
the animated,
one. And I think probably the movie that's responsible for me always being critical of movies just having no stakes. Mm-hmm. You know what's going to happen because they kill Optimus Prime in that movie. And as a kid, when they did that, it's like anything can happen. Anything goes in this world. All bets are off, and I thought that was like the coolest movie I'd ever seen.
Oh yeah!
I also wrote down, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the movie, the live action.
Oh yeah!
And both those have one thing in common: they say a couple of bad words, and when you're a kid, you're like, "This is grown-up stuff. I'm no longer watching kid things."
Yeah, I've graduated to the next level.
There's characters dying.
Oh my
There's
gosh!
characters, in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it was like dark and gritty, like for a child. And I remember thinking, like, this is amazing. Like, this is. It made me feel like I was watching like grown-up stuff, but like as a kid. And of course now I would look back and be like, it's still awesome, but I'm like, it wasn't as like edgy as it felt as a kid.
Oh no,
because as a kid it just felt like the edgiest.
Oh yeah.
And then the other movie I wrote down is Willow.
Oh yeah,
are you familiar with Willow?
I saw it in the movie theater.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah, Val Kilmer's in it.
Val Kilmer's in it, and it's amazing now knowing how much of it borrows from like Lord of the Rings and stuff. A lot. Mm-hmm. But Mad Mardigan, Val Kilmer's character was like my hero. He was so cool, this excellent swordsman. The villain in the movie, the one villain who has like the skeleton mask.
Yes,
that was my Darth Vader as a child.
Okay,
like as cool as Darth Vader looks, like when I thought of a villain, I thought of this guy in his like evil armor and skeleton mask and jagged sword. Like that's what a villain looked like in my mind. Mm-hmm. So I think that was the first movie that.
Yeah, I guess I didn't actually give a specific answer, did I? I just talked about a bunch of, because that's the thing for me. It wasn't necessarily one particular movie. It was just the combination of all these just entertaining movies always being on in our house.
Yeah, of all the firsts that we're going to try to identify, I think identifying a first favorite movie is nearly impossible.
It's tough because I mean, and I really racked my brain about this, and that's all my memory was, is just parts of all these really fun, entertaining movies.
Yeah. So the next one we're going to go on to is, and I think, there's sort of a natural progression as you get older of things you identify. So the first thing you're going to recognize is just movies you love. Mm-hmm. And the next thing you're going to identify with as you grow is you start to recognize people that you see in the movies, mm-hmm. and you have a favorite actor or actress. So do you remember a first favorite actor or actress that you had?
Oh, gosh. Going back to when I was a kid, I don't remember, like you're saying, when you're real young, you're just not even thinking about that, and you're almost, in my mind as a kid, it's like, well, these are just the Ghostbusters. Like, this is just who they are. Golly, I guess the first time I would really remember being interested in someone would probably be Tom Hanks, which I look back and I think that's a funny choice for a kid because we think of Tom Hanks now as, Academy Award winning Tom Hanks. But when I was a kid, Big. Yeah. That was another movie that was on all the time. Or predating Big would be Splash with Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah, where he falls in love with a mermaid. That was always on. And then Big. And it was like, I do remember Big being on and being like, oh, that's the guy from Splash. Of course, I'm not sitting there going, oh, that's Tom Hanks, and here's his other movies. But that was kind of the first time I remember, here's a recognizable face, and I know I like this guy. So Tom Hanks has unbelievable appeal because I'm probably 8 or 9. I think Big is 88, so I'd have been 8 years old at the time. And then he's in some of his lesser known movies like The Burbs or The Money Pit, movies like that, which are, like we were talking about earlier, maybe not the best movies, but just fun, entertaining movies. So I do remember, even at a young age, knowing I liked Tom Hanks.
Yeah. The way I tried to think of most of these with favorite actors, directors, we're going to get to, and that sort of thing, is who's the first people that I would think of that I would watch something just on their name being associated with it. I wrote down 3 names for actors, and they're all a little different. So the first one I wrote down was Sylvester Stallone. I think Rocky, got me in. And then it was like, my dad loves action movies, so he was showing me Sylvester Stallone action movies, and I would just, if Stallone was in it, I was convinced it was great. Yeah. I'm the guy, who watched Stop or My Mom Will Shoot and was convinced this is great.
This is a good movie. It's a really good movie. Somebody give Estelle Getty an Oscar for this movie.
And speaking of Oscar is a movie with Stallone, which I need to rewatch because I'm convinced it was actually a good movie, but I have not seen it since I was a little kid.
You rewatch it, and then you report back to the rest of us how it is.
I know the reputation that
it
has.
The reputation is not good.
It's got a great showing from Tim Curry in the movie though, so I love it. Good Tim Curry role. My next one was Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer was a guy that I think he was my first actor that I loved. That I thought I want to be that guy.
Sure.
He was first Doc Holliday in Tombstone. That's my introduction to him.
Yeah.
Later realized that I already knew him as Mad Mardigan in
Willow,
but I didn't even realize at the time that it was the same guy. He went on to do movies like Ghost in the Darkness.
Yeah.
And
saw that in the theater also.
And I just thought this dude is just the coolest.
Yeah.
He did The Saint, and again, not a great movie.
It's not a great movie.
Again, I was like, I had to be a fan because I love Val Kilmer in my mind. But he was the first one that I remember wanting to see movies just because he was in them. Yeah. And he did the movie At First Sight, the blind guy
with Mira Sorvino,
a movie that would never appeal to me.
But because he was
in it, I was like, I want to see this because it's got my guy Val Kilmer in it.
Sure.
So that's
I guess I should also say too. You said Stallone. I can't believe I didn't think of this, but I grew up watching Arnold and Stallone, and so I certainly, even at a young age, I was like, I don't know if these are my favorite actors, but it was like I would watch Conan the Destroyer as a small kid, and then I would go out in the backyard and play like I was Conan the Destroyer, or I had Rambo action figures. So I guess, I said Tom Hanks, maybe I should amend that and say Stallone and Schwarzenegger are the first guys that really captured my imagination, where it was like I would watch movies they were in and then I would want to go act it out in my yard, or, I would climb a tree and pretend like I was Rambo up in a tree. So it Yeah, those two guys for sure. But
Yeah.
Tom Hanks definitely is one who was like, I really like this guy.
Yeah. My third one I wrote down is Adam Sandler. From a comedy perspective. He was
Sure.
the guy that became the guy that, like, every Sandler movie that came out, me and my friends were there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know, and that had a pretty long run.
He had a long
probably
run,
longer
yeah.
than even these other guys. You know, it took until like the sort of mid 2000s. So there was a good 10-year run where Sandler was pure gold.
The Jack and Jill era when
Yeah.
things really went downhill for Sandler.
Which, you know, maybe it's coincidence, maybe it's not, that what I'm calling like his 10-year magic run also lined up with like me being 10 to 20.
Yeah, probably just a coincidence.
So, you know, maybe just coincidence.
Maybe.
Maybe it had something to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, you know, I still feel like I have stock in all those guys. You know, even,
sure.
Like Sandler, it's still awesome seeing him do like Hustle last year and just being like, you know, and get critical praise, Uncut Gems and things. And I'm still like, yeah, that's, you know, good for the Sandman.
Oh, absolutely. I think whoever you like or whatever movies you like as a kid, that sticks with you. I mean, I'll you turn Teen Wolf on right now and I'll sit and watch it because it ties into these hopefully good memories you have as a child of watching these movies. So yeah, whatever you like as a kid, it sticks with you as far as movies are concerned, I think.
Yeah. And just, you know, talking about that sticking with you, I was looking at, you know, the store online with all these T-shirts with movie references, and I was just clicking through page after page, just be like, "That's a great movie reference." I did get some of them, but you know, so I see your Mighty Mix, Jim, and it's just like that is a great Rocky reference, and seeing it just puts you in a better mood.
Absolutely. Full disclosure, we were together earlier today at lunch, and then I ran home before we did the podcast, and I knew exactly what shirt I wanted to get out of my dresser. I knew I wanted to grab my Mixed Gym shirt for the podcast. So.
Yeah, and I did the same. I was like, we're going back down memory lane. I'm wearing my Never Forget Blockbuster
shirt. Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Many great nights spent perusing the aisles of
my
Blockbuster.
Oh my gosh. I wish, you know, I said on this before that I have kids, and I always tell them, I wish you guys knew what it was like to go to a video store and just walk around when I was younger, I felt like I was in there for hours, and in a good way. Yeah. Just look at every movie, turn the box over and look at the back and read the description. It was amazing.
Yeah, it was, for whatever reason, I mean, it's exactly like scrolling through Netflix or whatever platform you're on, trying to decide what to watch. But something about doing it in person with physical media, it's just, it was more fun. It was more fun. It was like, just like, I can't decide what to watch when you're scrolling through Netflix. It was,
and there was also
like an adventure aspect to it.
And there was also no internet back then. So sometimes you would discover a movie just from, the cover of this movie looks like, I wish I had thought about this beforehand and I could maybe think of something that I just didn't know anything about, and then saw the box, read the description, and thought, well, this sounds really cool. So I would just rent it, and then all of a sudden, now I have this movie in my life that I literally didn't even know existed. Now, you know, we know the Marvel release schedule through 2027. It was so different back then. You could find these hidden gems of movies that you didn't even know existed. And now you know everything that exists and everything that will exist. It's harder for something to sneak in and grab your attention that you didn't even know existed.
That's very true. Now, I mean, there's things like podcasts where movie fans are telling everybody what's good and what to watch.
Yeah.
Back in the day, it was, if you were lucky, you had a good video store employee who was like,
dude, you
your
should check this
Quentin
movie
Tarantino
out.
Working it, going like, you like this? Well, may I suggest to you?
Yeah.
It was like having one of those wine connoisseurs or something who could.
But for movies, like, I see you like this. Try this.
Yeah. Shows my knowledge. There's a word for, what is it, a sommelier or something? He was a wine expert. Like, it's like a movie sommelier.
Yeah.
Yes. This great 1980 classic.
Oh, yeah. And like I said, I wish I would have thought ahead of time, because I'm sure I did that. I rented a lot of movies in my day, and I'm sure there were some I rented that I just thought, I don't know, this looks cool. The box, the cover art is cool. It's probably a cool movie. And I'm sure I stumbled upon some good movies. Maybe it'll come to me as we're doing the podcast.
Yeah. All right. So moving on from actors, next one we're going to talk about is director, first favorite director. And as I said, this is probably moving down the timelines. You probably get a little older before you start thinking about things like who's behind the camera of a movie. So I know my answer is definitely going to be from when I was a little older than even those other ones. But did you have a first favorite director?
Yeah. So, you grow up in the 80s and I was just a kid watching these movies. And once I was old enough to really know, like, I love movies. Movies are going to be a part of my life forever. I also grew up in the era of, there was a Walden Books, which is a bookstore in every mall. And I quickly learned, I would say by the time I'm 11 or 12, I learned that in Walden Books, they would have a section of books about movies. So I started reading those and buying those and looking at those. And I would start reading, there would be books like the 100 Greatest Movies Ever Made. And I would just read that and read that. And one name I kept seeing pop up on a lot of these lists was Martin Scorsese. So I remember, thinking, okay, I want to start watching Martin Scorsese movies. I keep reading about him. So I got super into Martin Scorsese. And I've seen every movie he's ever made. I had to backtrack because So like I said, at 12 or 13 probably really started diving into Scorsese and his movies. And that was the first time, because it lined up with my age where you could think a little bit more. And like you were saying, thinking about who's behind the camera. Oh, he chose to do this. Or Scorsese does a lot of slow motion and freeze frame and stuff like that. And, when I really started noticing that and learning about that, not learning the techniques or anything like that, but just like, oh, that's cool. This is more than Ghostbusters or Beverly Hills Cop. Like Goodfellas is a good example where there's, freeze frames and music and how the music lines up with the scenes in the movie. And it just opened my mind up to this whole new world.
Oh yeah. The Goodfellas is a good example of like the first time you recognize like there's not a cut in a shot. Something just keeps going and you're kind of like, you don't think about how much you see cuts until you don't see one for a while and you're like, wow, this is really going for a while without a cut.
Yeah.
And then you start thinking like, well, how did they do that?
Oh my gosh.
That's really impressive that they did that. And you might know it's up your head how long that tracking shot goes.
And
they
the
walk through
Copacabana, what is it? I would just guess 3 minutes maybe. I don't know. That might be a terrible guess, but yeah. And like you said, you don't even realize, it's not like I was watching that going, I bet you there's going to be a scene in this movie where there's no cuts. But then once you see it, you go, wait, something was different about that. And so, yeah, Scorsese, and then I just became obsessed with him. And I bought, books about him and about his directing style and how the way he would direct he was telling a story through the camera and the way he was choosing to do his freeze frames, or like I said, he was really big on slow motion. He would do slow motion, like in Taxi Driver. If Travis Bickle is staring at someone who he perceives as an enemy, the camera would slow down, and the person would be moving in slow motion. And that was supposed to reflect like he's really focused on this person and thinking about this person. And it was like, oh my gosh, like it was a whole new world to me. And then I went back and I wanted to rewatch all of his movies, which I did. And he's been my favorite ever since.
That's such a good answer because that's one that you can say unashamedly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
My answer may be a little different than that.
Okay.
Because my first favorite director was Michael Bay.
Oh.
And I feel like it's a little more justifiable early in his career.
Sure.
When he became. But The Rock was the movie that got me.
The Rock is a good movie.
It's a good movie. The Rock. Yep. I mean, I put it probably in like my top 10 all time. And I was 12 years old.
Yeah, it came out in 96.
Not quite 12, actually. Just, summer before I turned 12. And it was the most awesome thing I'd ever seen. Oh,
yeah.
And, so I went back and watched Bad Boys. And he comes out with Armageddon. But, going back to what was the first movie that I saw strictly because of director? I think the first movie I saw strictly because a director was doing it was The Island. Mm-hmm. And I think it was even one that, like, the subject matter, I knew it was kind of like about clones and stuff. I was like, that doesn't really...
It was kind of a Michael Bay miss.
But I'm in because it's Michael Bay, and I think, like, his stuff's always so exciting and looks so cool.
Yeah.
And he is. Like, I mean, he's great at the aesthetics of films.
He is.
he definitely gets way too self-indulgent. And
He does.
He's got a lot of problems, but as a teenager, Michael Bay, Michael Bay makes movies for teenage boys. Like that's, I was his target demographic. I get that.
Absolutely.
And I love
I don't think that's a bad answer at all. I mean, he made fast, exciting movies, and the guy knows how to do big action. And I back you up completely. I was 16 when The Rock came out, saw it in the theater, went back within probably 3 or 4 days, saw it again in the theater. Like, he knew how to make, or knows how to make fun, exciting movies, and for sure. And listen, my Scorsese answer is not because I'm some intellect. It just, the timing all lined up perfectly where I was ready, I think, to move into the next level of my movie fandom. It was kind of a natural progression, and Scorsese was just the perfect person to latch on to.
Yeah. I need to look through all his filmography and figure out, I know I've got a bunch of gaps in my Scorsese. I've seen a lot of the big ones, obviously.
Yeah.
I've seen
Goodfellas
and Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and then of course more modern ones.
Yeah.
But I know he's got a lot of. He's one of those guys who's been making movies for so long. He's got.
Oh my gosh.
He's got movies I've not even heard of actually. And there's occasionally someone will mention a movie like, Scorsese did that movie, and I'm like, I didn't even realize Scorsese did that movie. Yeah. But all right, next one, sort of the one that probably again takes us even further down in life before we think about this. Did you have a first favorite writer of movies?
Yeah. I was talking to you at lunch, and I said this one was a really hard one. That is honestly something I don't even think I've really thought about until way into my adult life. I think because growing up, and even as a teenager when I was really into following movies and Scorsese and all these different things, I still wasn't considering the author of the movie, the writer of the movie. And I just liked so many different movies. We were joking at lunch. I would watch Goodfellas and I would watch Cobra. And I loved them both, even though they're obviously Goodfellas is on a much higher level. So I didn't ever consider that until much later in life. But now I would say, and you can make a ruling here if this is a cheat, but I'm going to choose Tarantino, who is
no cheat at all.
More known as a director, but has written every single one of his movies.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and actually I think kind of got his foot in the door writing before
he wrote the True Romance screenplay, and he's credited, I think, with the Natural Born Killer's story. But the reason I choose him is because, again, I'm 14 when Pulp Fiction comes out. And he had made Reservoir Dogs before that in 92. I didn't even know that movie existed, which kind of goes to what I was talking about earlier, the video store world. I didn't even know there was a movie called Reservoir Dogs or a person named Quentin Tarantino. Pulp Fiction hits. It's a phenomenon. It's all any movie nerd circles are talking about for a long time. But you watch that, and then because of that, I went back and watched Reservoir Dogs. And I was telling my kids this the other day. I was talking to them about Quentin Tarantino, and I said it literally changed the way I think about movies. I never even realized that, the characters in his movies are talking about things unrelated to the plot of the movie they're in. They're talking about other movies, and they're talking about music and food and all this stuff. And at 14 years old, I just had never considered, this is an option. This is something you can do. So his words and his dialogue opened up this world that I never even considered could exist, where the characters in his movies just had conversations like that me and like my friends were having about other movies or characters in movies or actors. It was unbelievable, and it blew my mind as a young person.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. I have a weird relationship with Pulp Fiction because I saw it much later in life. I was 10 when it came out, so I didn't watch it when it came out.
That's probably good.
And by the time I saw it,
it had all the hype behind it.
Not just all the hype behind it, but so many movies were doing what it did. I had seen those movies.
It was so ripped off.
And so, I think that novelty didn't hit me the same as it did people who saw Pulp Fiction when it came out first. And so, I have people tell me, if you would have seen it in the moment, you'd appreciate so much more. And I'm I'm sure that's the case. I think it's a fine movie. Like I said, it didn't hit me the same way though.
Sure.
And I think probably because I can look at and people say this movie ripped it off, this movie ripped it off, this movie ripped it off.
But you saw all those movies first, yeah.
And so, it probably didn't help my enjoyment of Pulp Fiction. But Tarantino, I really like him as a writer. He's
just so unique and weird, but I mean weird as a compliment, and he just makes movies still to this day. You know, the movies he's making now, they're so original. And that is my number one pet peeve about movies is when they're just forgettable. And he just writes this quirky, weird, funny, original dialogue. I just love the voice he puts into his movies.
And I joked about earlier, crediting the Transformers the movie with Optimus Prime's death being like why I think movies should be unpredictable and there should be stakes. There's no more unpredictable filmmaker than Tarantino. He will do, when you watch his movies, he'll do anything.
Yeah.
Including alter history.
Yeah.
So
nothing is off the table with him.
Yeah.
Nobody's safe in his movies. People die in an instant. I mean,
he'll randomly have voiceover when it hadn't been there all the time. He'll randomly do something in cartoon when it hadn't been, he'll literally do anything. And so you're right. It keeps you invested because but he somehow makes it work. You describe that and you'd be like, that sounds like chaos and there's no way that could come together and be good. But he has a way of
he does
doing
it. Yeah. So definitely, it was hard for me to think about that. I had never thought about how little I think about the writer of a movie. So it was a good exercise for me too to think about that. But yeah, Tarantino is definitely where I landed.
Yeah. Again, like I said, it happened later in life, so my first favorite is still my favorite, and that's Aaron Sorkin.
Yeah.
And seems like such an obvious choice. Probably, of course, like you're saying with Scorsese, you could feel like I'm going, look at me and my my film credibility. I like Sorkin, but no, he was. So much of my movie taste was so action based. Growing up, like I said, Michael Bay movies were my favorite.
Sure.
Blow stuff up, be exciting, be intense. And then as I got older and it started shifting more to liking relationship dynamics. But Sorkin has that dialogue like action.
Yeah.
And it sort of had that pep and energy that I love in movies, but it would develop characters through it. And it was I can't believe that this can work like this.
Yeah.
And it was...
I've seen people say before, he writes action movies, but just through his dialogue.
Right, and so anytime I see Sorkin,
what was his first movie that you latched onto? Do you remember? A Few Good Men, maybe?
A Few Good Men was definitely one of the first, but it's again one of those ones I didn't see Few Good Men right when it came out, and so I can't remember if that was the first one that I saw or not. And then I was trying to think through, and his the timeline starts to get real fuzzy with
I'm not great on his
because he was such
timeline.
a show guy too. He did the shows, and I was even late on the shows. He did the show The Newsroom.
Yes,
and so he's one of those guys. I knew I liked him, and it's he kept doing projects that just hammering it home more and more. Of course, The Social Network being possibly my favorite movie of all time, being written by him. Then he did Moneyball and the Steve Jobs movies. He just kept doing movies that I loved. And then I would go back and revisit his older stuff. And again, Few Good Men probably was the first one that I saw.
Yeah.
Of course, it was his first movie he wrote, but it wasn't just I saw Few Good Men and said that's my favorite writer. It was more I learned to love him other things and went back and said, oh, this guy also wrote this other movie I really liked.
So I think there's an advantage too of discovering someone later because it's really fun to go back. Because that's what happened with me with Scorsese, where it's okay, I probably need to watch Goodfellas. That seems like the movie I need to watch. Watched it, loved it, and then it's now I get to go back and see everything leading up to that. It's fun to follow people's development.
Yeah. I have one last one in this category, which I sent you a preliminary list. I thought of this last night while I was making my notes.
It's okay.
And it's okay if you don't have one because this feels extra nerdy, but did you have a first favorite film composer? Because I did, and my first favorite was Hans Zimmer. He did Broken Arrow and The Rock, and those were two movie scores I went out and bought and I would listen to. And I was I love this guy Hans Zimmer, and he's done, of course, a ton of other great movie scores.
Now he's Nolan's guy, right?
Yeah, Hans has always been my guy, and it was those first two movies that drew me in.
Sheesh. Yeah. By the way, Broken Arrow and The Rock, those are amazing scores. And I bet people that don't even realize they came from those. Like the Broken Arrow theme, Scream just completely boosted it for Dewey's theme. It's Dewey's theme is the Broken Arrow.
Right.
Yeah. And actually, I watched The Rock not too long ago and it has a really good score. Gosh, you really put me on the spot there.
Just throw
that's okay. I might be inclined to answer the same as you. And I think maybe I would have discovered Zimmer through Nolan's movies, the Batman movies, where just first time I noticed because what I had noticed first more than anything, I'm going to say Scorsese a lot in this podcast, is the way he would use not a score, but actual music, like Layla and Goodfellas or Sunshine of Your Love and Goodfellas when they do kind of the slow motion on De Niro. So yeah, maybe Zimmer might be my answer then, because I'm trying to think, with the Batman trilogy, I don't know that is just a great score in and of itself, but just the way he would use the music and the big blaring kind of, just the different things like that.
No, I think, like we were talking about with Goodfellas and the long shots with no cuts, like you don't recognize why it's different at first. You start to go like something looks different. Hans Zimmer, working with Nolan in particular, really started making music that was, it didn't sound like traditional movie music. Like for the Joker, he had this like weird tension building, like eerie, screechy, but it set such an atmosphere. You're going like, what am I hearing? Is it music? But it's perfect, whatever it is. And then
as you were saying that sentence, I was saying that sentence in my mind too. That's my answer, because that would be the thing too. That Joker theme where it's just like the prolonged, like I think I even read once maybe is like a bad violin noise just drawn out for the Joker, and you're going, oh my gosh, this is scary and different. And so that would be my answer.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
So now we're going to transition a little bit from first favorites to just some first experiences.
Okay.
And this first one was really hard for me to try to think of what the answer would be. So the first one I asked was, do you know what the first movie was you watched in theaters?
Yeah. So this goes back to what you said earlier, where sometimes, especially as you get older, your memories kind of all blur together. And you even have that thing where you're like, did that happen? Or did I kind of invent that? But I swear I have a memory of seeing E.T. in the theater. But it had to have been a re-release, because E.T. came out in 1982, so I was 2. I don't think my mom would have taken me to E.T. when I was 2. I don't think. My mom was very fun and laid back, and so she might have. But I think I have a memory of seeing E.T. at some point in the theater. Not a great memory, but I feel like that memory exists in my brain somewhere. So I think my first theater memory is E.T.
Okay. I was sitting there thinking, like, I couldn't remember a movie that I knew came out before this one, but for some reason it felt a little later in life to have be my first movie in theater. But the first one I could think of was Aladdin, the Disney cartoon Aladdin. I going to see it with my family, and it came out in '92, I think.
Yeah, '92.
It was in like summer of '92, so I would have been 7, about to turn 8, and I looked up a whole bunch of other movies that were all like 92, 93 range. I was like, I think that's probably what if it started then, boy, it took off, and I was just seeing movies all the time in theaters after that. Yeah. But I just couldn't find one earlier than that. But Aladdin was the first one that I could come up with as having seen it in the theater for certain.
Yeah, I can remember when like you're saying, like I do remember when I finally just started seeing movies in the theater. Like I remember seeing Beetlejuice in the theater. I remember seeing Christmas Vacation in the theater. That's when it's like I know that happened. I remember that. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. That was a big one. I very much remember seeing that and thinking it was awesome.
Yeah. I wrote some little offshoots of this question. If you don't remember off the top of your head, that's fine. Do you remember your first movie theater experience that you went to without your parents?
Ooh.
I will tell you mine while you think about it. My first one I know was, that I can remember at least, was the original Mission Impossible in '96.
Nice.
And that was, I went with a friend of mine who lived down the street, got it orchestrated for my dad to take us and drop us off. There was a theater, we called the Cheap Theater. It was the greatest thing in the world, because what it did was it had movies that had been out for a while and were moving out of regular theaters, but before they came out on video, they would be in this cheap theater, and you could go see it for like $2. You go see these movies that have been out for a long time. And so I got to go to the cheap theater, which is me and my friend went down the street. My dad could drop us off a couple bucks. We go in, watch Mission Impossible. I saw so many movies at that cheap theater. It was like the greatest place in the world for me as a kid, because if I had to scrape together my own money to go see a movie, all I had to scrape together was $2, and I could go see a movie.
Perfect. So I do remember mine. Actually, also, I want to amend my earlier statement when I said Hans Zimmer. I can't believe, I'm ashamed of myself. John Williams is my answer for music. I cannot believe this is your fault. You put me on the spot too much. The Jaws theme.
Yeah.
And of course at the time I wasn't going, who is it, but Jaws, E.T., Raiders of the Lost Ark. John Williams is my answer.
In the 80s, if you liked a famous movie score,
John Williams did it.
John Williams.
Yeah. So I'm ashamed of myself for not thinking of that earlier.
I almost mentioned him earlier, but then I was like, it's, everyone watching or listening at home is probably going, John Williams.
Probably. So yes, I love Hans Zimmer, but my answer is John Williams. Yeah. So this is going to say a lot about my life growing up. Listen, it was just a more laid back time. The very first movie I ever saw in a theater, which was also kind of what you're describing, like a cheap theater, saw it by myself. My parents took me, dropped me off. They're like, we're going to go get groceries. We'll come back and pick you up when this movie's over with. It was Candyman, the original Candyman, which is a horrifying movie. It's a really scary movie. And it came out in 92, so I'd have been 12. And that's just how things were back then. They were like, all right, here's a few bucks. See you later. We're going to get groceries. We'll pick you up after Candyman is over.
I think he was like Willy Wonka, perhaps.
Oh, my gosh. I do remember, and I can remember having that moment because the movie, it comes out hot. I mean, it opens up hot where Candyman, big jump scare, he appears behind this lady in the mirror, and then she's upstairs, her boyfriend's downstairs. He kills her, and blood just starts soaking through the top of the ceiling. And it was like, I may be in over my head here, but I stayed, and that was the first movie I ever saw by myself. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for scarring me for life.
Yeah, and then you don't have to answer this one if you don't want to, but I just have a distinct memory of the first R-rated movies I saw in theater. The first one I saw was A Time to Kill.
Okay.
It came out in
96. Yep.
My mom had read the book, and she wanted to go see it as a family, so we went to go see A Time to Kill, and I just remember it being a big deal. 96 again, I would have been 11, about turned 12, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to see an R-rated movie.
An R-rated movie, and that's a heavy R-rated movie. Not like content-wise, but just it tackles some big issues.
Yeah, but I really enjoyed the movie because I loved everything as a kid.
Me too.
When I say that, like, my mom even, she would want to watch these chick flicks that my dad and older brother would have no interest in, and I'd always be like, I'll watch them with you. I'll watch anything. And I would watch chick flicks with my mom. And
same.
And I would find a way to like any of it.
Oh, yeah.
Which is maybe why I'm so jaded now. I think maybe I liked so much stuff that I just ran out of room to like things.
Yeah, you maxed out at a young age.
I got to be particular, yeah. But then, so I saw A Time to Kill, and then like a month later I saw The Rock, and that was...
it was off. I can tell you my first R-rated movie in the theater. Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4. My mom took me to see it because I loved Freddy Krueger, and I thought horror movies were cool. So when I was 8 years old, my mom and I went and watched Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4 in the theater. No regrets.
This really is the Get to Know Your Host podcast because people are going to be like, that explains Andy.
Yeah. They'll be like, oh, that's why he is the way he is. Yeah. So Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, 1988. I was 8 years old. It's all in the theater.
That is so great.
It's great. I'm so glad I have those memories. I also saw, I didn't believe it would be the next year, 89, I think. She took me to see Halloween 5 in the theater. So
I've watched all the Halloween movies. I'm a little fuzzy on which one 5 is. Is that the one where he has like a little niece that he has like a telepathic connection with?
Yeah.
Great child actor performance by that girl. Not enough people have seen those Halloweens, those later Halloweens.
She's great. She's in 4 and 5. Her name is Danielle Harris because I just know stuff like this. That's why
we have a movie themed podcast, Andy.
It is. And she's really good. Yeah.
Phenomenal in it.
Yeah.
But a lot of people did not expect to hear us talk about Halloween 5.
Halloween 5 and good acting combined. Everyone's going to be like, oh my gosh, these guys.
That's true. But I'm being sincere. I had a friend of mine that we went through all the Halloween movies in college, and maybe it's because Halloween 3 and 4 had some really bad some others had really bad actors in it. That girl showed up, was like, this girl's actually killing it.
She's good. And she's really little.
Yeah.
In Halloween 4. Listen, I hope one day we can do a horror movie deep dive podcast, because Halloween, Friday 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, I just grew up on those. And I look back and I go, oh my gosh, Mom, you were really letting me watch these at a really young age, and there's a lot going on in these movies.
Yeah, I did not grow up on horror movies. Probably that's like the one genre, because nobody else in my family was into it, that I didn't really get introduced to. I think the first horror movies that I got into were the Scream movies. Yeah. And I thought about that before I realized that Michael Bay was before my answer, but Wes Craven, that was one of the first times that I remember a movie being sold on a
Wes
name
Craven
that wasn't
movie.
the guy in front of a Wes Craven movie. So when you saw it, it was very much put into your mind like, this is Wes Craven. So then it's like, oh, well, what else has this guy done? And then
Director of the original Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, started learning more about him. Mm-hmm. Next category. First movie ever purchased, to own at home. And I went kind of crazy deep dive on this. I started thinking through the different versions of the medium. VHS, as you said, we might have to explain what a VHS is to the younger listeners, such as your kids who don't understand this boxy tape that you have to physically rewind to restart the movie. And, forever associated with Blockbuster with me, going and like we were talking about finding those cassette cases. And when you see the display box and really hoping there's a copy of the rental.
And it's the disappointment of going to get the movie and it was out. It was gone. The box was there, but the movie was unavailable. That was devastating.
That last minute chance of going, check the movies around it, because maybe someone hid one,
maybe
like we would
stashed
sometimes
it.
do. And every once in a while, if you ever found one like that, it's like, I found it. Someone did hide it.
It was like you struck gold.
Yeah. So again, I can go first if you want to
go ahead.
VHS was the hardest one for me to remember.
Yeah.
Because I definitely had a few VHSs, and trying to remember which one did I buy, because there's ones that my parents got for me they knew I liked, or I asked for it, I got for a present.
Yeah.
But the one I can remember distinctly that I did buy, and I think might have been the first one that I bought, went to the store with my own money and got myself, was Red Dawn. The 1984 movie.
Yeah.
Which of course I didn't buy it in '84. I bought it probably 94 or something.
Right.
But that one was like a big purchase for me that
I was able to go buy. I would not have guessed that.
Yeah. And then when DVDs came out, I bought a DVD player with my own money. Mm-hmm. And I remember my dad thinking I feel like this is a waste of money.
They were so expensive.
They were so expensive, and he wasn't convinced that they were really going to become a thing. He thought, I was kind of blowing my money on some big novelty thing that would not be, wasn't going to replace VHS.
Right.
Of course, then, I turned to be right. And DVD
you were right about that one, yeah.
But I bought two movies together as my first purchases for DVD, and it was The 13th Warrior.
Okay.
And Saving Private Ryan.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Those were my first two DVDs, and that DVDs was when I really started collecting movies. I really started trying to buy up movies. I was up the right age. I was actually working some and had some money to spend on those things.
Yeah.
And that's what I spent all my money on. Was buying movies.
I was huge into having a DVD collection.
Yeah. So those were my first two of that. We get all the way up to Blu-ray. When I got a Blu-ray player, my first Blu-ray I ever bought was 3:10 to Yuma, the remake with Christian Bale and why am I blanking on his name? From Gladiator and A Beautiful Mind. And
Russell Crowe.
Yes, Russell Crowe, who was
It's a good movie.
Yeah. And then I was going all the way up to try to even figure out, what was the first digital movie I bought when everything went online and digital. And it was a real struggle for me because my digital library was mostly filled with Blu-ray movies I had bought that came with a digital code. And when I realized I could do that, I started converting them. The best guess that I have is Everybody Wants Some, which is the Richard Linklater spiritual sequel to Dazed and Confused, which I think will become a huge cult movie like Dazed and Confused in the years to come.
Interesting.
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a good call.
So those were my first purchases on each different medium.
Man, you did dive into that.
Yeah.
So for me, unlike you, the hardest one to remember was VHS because, number one, when I grew up, you would get a blank VHS tape and you would record the movie off of HBO. Yes. So I have memories of these blank tapes, and like we would put like a piece of tape on the side, and it would be like Ghostbusters / Teen Wolf, because you could fit 2 movies on one tape, or it would be like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and Commando. I mean, so those were awesome. Yeah. And then we had like family, my parents would buy like Ghostbusters or whatever, and we would have. The first one I remember purchasing, I have a memory of, and I don't know why, I would have been probably because the movie came out in 94, would be Pulp Fiction. So when it came out on VHS, it came out in like fall of 94. I'm sure it came out on VHS in 95. And I remember I purchased that. This is my movie. The rest of these movies are just, we had these family movies we would keep. But it was like, I want Pulp Fiction. And it was, if you weren't there at the time, it's hard to even explain what a phenomenon that was. And I remember getting my hands on that. And it's like, yes, I have it. No one can take it away from me. So that would be my first VHS purchase. My first DVD purchase was the original Halloween. Funny that we were talking about Halloween earlier. Yeah, I was always a fan, and I just remember thinking, like, I bet this movie's going to look great on the DVD format, and you're going to be able to... Actually, this is funny. The big question in my mind was, like, now that it's so clear and it's on a DVD, I wonder if I'll be able to see Michael Myers in the... I thought I was going to be, like, the first person to ever realize, like, oh, you can see him in the background of this scene. Turns out I was not. But that was my first DVD purchase. And it was cool when the DVDs would come out and they would have like these long, like making of documentaries about the movie. And I think that's why I purchased Halloween. I think if I remember right, there was like a hour and a half long, like making of feature on the DVD. And it was awesome.
On DVDs they were for film nerds like us.
Oh my gosh. It was just, it was like,
I watched a lot of movies with director's commentary.
Me too. Director's commentary was definitely a thing.
It's been a while since I've done that, but there was a stretch.
There was a stretch, and you would learn stuff. Like sometimes they were informative. Yeah. My first Blu-ray purchase, I remember this very well, was Dark Knight. It was like, Dark Knight. I mean, I got to get this on Blu-ray. Yeah. And digital, I'm going to show my age. I'm not a purchaser of digital. I don't do that. Yeah. I just don't. So I like it. I like the old school method. I want the physical copy of something.
Yeah. If something is really good, I really want it. I like having the physical copy. But that said, it's really hard to buy movies anymore because almost everything goes on some sort of streaming platform. Yeah. That where it feels like, well, maybe I shouldn't waste the money on buying it because I can go here for free and watch it. But sometimes it makes me sad that I look at my Blu-ray collection, and after a certain year, it sort of stops.
I know.
And I'm like, in more recent movies, I kind of want some reputation.
Oh my gosh.
I can't say words right now.
That's okay.
Normally I bring a water. I have not wet my lips at all, and so now I'm...
Classic podcast mistake.
Yeah. We will get nothing but better as the weeks go on, though. So imagine, as good as we've been already.
It's good. It's only going to get better.
It's only going to get better.
But it does, it makes me, man, I really miss that era of a DVD collection. Like I had a DVD shelf, like a nice wooden DVD shelf. And I was so proud of that thing. And I just loved adding movies to it. And then you would go on the hunt for older movies or obscure movies. And it was so much fun. And I'm going to sound like the grumpy old guy, but I just do not like digital and streaming. I love that era, from whenever it was 2000 maybe on, where it was like a DVD collection was a big deal.
Yeah. And again, sounding like the grumpy old man that I am, digital, as great as it is, it still cannot compete in quality with the actual physical copy. Like a Blu-ray will still produce better quality than whatever you're streaming. Yeah. Just like I tell people, if a CD still sounds way better than whatever you're streaming on Spotify or something like that. Like the noticeable difference, like if you watch one back to back. So like I said, if I really care about a movie, I still want to get in on Blu-ray because that quality is just
better.
Just maybe only the people who really care are going to perceive these things, but it just is a little better.
Yeah, and like I said too, you just can't. It's hard to explain now, like what a big deal it was when a movie you liked would come out on DVD or Blu-ray or whatever, and it would have bonus features or deleted scenes, making of, director's commentaries were fun. That was such a cool era to be a movie nerd.
It was.
It was a really exciting time.
Yeah. And, again, little nerdy thing. The other great thing about Blu-rays was how skinny they were, because when you're making your collection, you could really pack them in there. And it looked, to have a shelf full of Blu-rays looked like...
It looked great.
It looked like you had so many movies, and it looked great. VHS was so bulky.
It was bulky. And even some of the, like when DVDs first came out, they had the case, like you had to snap the side of it to open it, and I never liked those. And then, like you said, the Blu-ray cases were perfect. They looked cool. It was literally a blue, the color of the, it was just really cool. It looked cool up on a shelf.
Yeah.
And we have never probably sounded nerdier than we do right now in this moment.
That's true.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's what this is.
I'm proud of us.
That's what this is.
I'm proud of us.
Yeah. This is how we earned the podcast, by being so nerdy about something that we have a lot to say about it.
Absolutely.
All right, my last one that I wrote, which I'm curious if you even have an answer for. Do you have a first movie that you ever walked out of?
Oh, yeah. I saw this on your list, and then so I do remember. Gosh, it's so hard to explain all this without just, you have to understand who you are or the people who are listening have to understand who I am as a person. Like you were saying, I just loved all movies. I really didn't care. I just liked going to the theater. I didn't have a lot going on in my life at that time. So I do remember going to the theater. This would be in the 90s during the Mortal Kombat craze. Mortal Kombat was huge in the arcades and stuff. And they had made the first Mortal Kombat movie, and it was not good.
Yeah, how dare you?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It's a classic. And then they made a second one. And somehow one of my friends and I in high school, who was also a movie nerd, we decided we would go see the second Mortal Kombat movie. And like halfway through, we just looked at each other and we were like, even for us, this is this is really bad. And we were probably hungry at the time or something. It was just like, let's just go to McDonald's. And so we left that movie.
Just for the audience to know, that one's called Mortal Kombat
Annihilation. Yeah.
And it is that bad.
It's so bad. And then I begrudgingly left another movie, and that was The Dark Knight, because my dear wife was so scared of the Joker. I had already seen the movie like 3 times in the theater, and we had like a date night, and I was probably I was just being selfish, and I just wanted to see The Dark Knight again. It's like, no, dear, you're going to love this movie, I promise. And the Joker just made her so on edge and uncomfortable. She's like, can we please just go? And I was like, it's fine. We made it like halfway through the movie, and we had to leave. But I almost wanted to leave announcing to everybody, this is not my decision. This is my wife's decision. I would never leave a masterpiece like The Dark Knight. So it's a short list.
Yeah, my list is a total of 1.
Okay.
Movies I've ever walked out
on.
Oh,
I can't wait to hear this.
And that is House of Wax.
Amazing performance from Paris Hilton in that movie.
I think I was like a freshman in college or somewhere around there when this movie came out.
It's bad.
I want to say my friends and I went to the cheap theater to see it, so there wasn't a lot of investment in it. I could be wrong about that, but and just about halfway through the movie, I remember, I can't remember if it was myself or one of my friends, somebody that was in the middle of the 3 of us looked and just said,
let's just go.
Are you enjoying this? No. Are you enjoying this? Do you want to go? Yeah. And we got up and we left. And I never once thought, well, did I miss something? How did it end? I never once regretted walking out of that movie.
It would be so funny if, like, years later you were reading some review and everyone's like, the final act of House of Wax is just unbelievable. No, that's a fair choice. That was a really bad point in horror where they were just churning out just forgettable, gory movies. They were latching on to like D-list celebrities like Paris Hilton to be in their movie, and it's not a good time.
Right. And
now,
I did write down 2 close calls, 2 movies where there was some discussion and debate. The first one was Cold Creek Manor.
That is a terrible movie with Sharon Stone and Dennis Quaid.
I think the same friends that we walked to House of Wax.
That movie's so bad.
It's so bad.
It's so boring.
That we started making fun of it in the theater. I think we probably thought we were going to leave. And so we just started like being loud and obnoxious in the theater. And there was other people in the theater. Not a lot, but a few. And I think the movie was so bad, nobody
was mad at you
nobody
guys?
cared.
Oh.
And so we ended up staying and just kind of laughing and like roasting the movie. That's the only reason we didn't walk out, is that we were given free reign to be obnoxious and make fun of the movie.
Is it Stephen Dorff? Is he the bad guy in that movie? Yeah. I saw that movie in the theater.
It is such a nothing
happens. It's a terrible movie.
Really horrible.
What I was going to bring that up too is I was going to add, like, there's a lot of movies I should have walked out on. I've seen some really bad movies in the theaters. I do remember one movie that I spent like the last hour of the movie debating whether I should get up and leave, and that was, you actually brought it up earlier, which is really funny, The Saint with Val Kilmer. I was so bored during that movie. I think it's the 96, 95, 96, or 90. It's 95, 96, or 97. It's one of those. And I just remember just sitting there. I just thought that was the most boring movie. I don't know what I was expecting. And then finally it just ended. And I was like, oh, I should have just left.
The other close call I wrote down, it was actually not my decision. I had to talk my dad and brother out of it. I'm not to say talk out of it. I think they looked at each other and said, should we leave? And I said, no, don't leave. Let's just Spider-Man 3. When he starts being emo Spider-Man and he's like dancing and stuff, my dad and brother would look at each other, rolling their eyes so hard, and they were like, this is so dumb. They were like, do we just want to leave? And I said, let's not leave. Let's just power through.
Maybe
it's got to get better.
I think you could make an argument that might be the worst, 30 seconds? 30 seconds to maybe somewhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes, let's say. Maybe the worst time frame ever committed to film.
Yeah.
I can't believe that Tobey Maguire and Sam Raimi made that, and they were like, cut, good, we've got it, great job. It's so bad. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just YouTube it, and I guarantee you it'll pop up.
I would say, I don't know if there's a person in the world who, even if you haven't seen that movie, that clip's become so infamous.
It's indescribable how bad that is. It's just unbelievable. We could do an entire podcast on that section of that movie. And that movie I was so hyped for that movie because Spider-Man 2 was so good.
It was. And the previews looked amazing.
It looked so cool. And that movie is bad.
And then I would say, good thing we powered through, because boy, did it come together in the end.
No, it's a bad movie.
It was It's very perplexing how things go wrong when you got the same people.
Same creative team for all three movies.
You're like, one's good, two's even better, three's falls off.
Boy, they did not land the plane, did they?
They did not.
Can I throw a bonus question on to you? Because you've been talking about this and Cold Creek Manor and some of these movies. Does anything stick out to you as like, this is the worst movie I've ever seen in the theater? And maybe there's different categories, like so bad that we make fun of it and it almost becomes like a movie we love, or does anything jump out to you?
So, my answer for this usually is Cold Creek Manor.
Yeah.
But if, since I've already talked about that, I'll bring up another one. That's Stuck on You, which was a Fairly Brothers movie with Matt Damon
and Greg Kinnear,
where they're conjoined twins.
It's a really bad movie.
And the Fairly Brothers were coming off of having done There's Something About Mary.
Dumb and Dumber. Something About Mary was a phenomenon.
And it's like, oh, these guys are on fire.
Yeah.
And here's, seems like a great, funny concept. These can join. And that was their whole thing. They would always take these, kind of situations like that. It just seemed right up their alley. And the movie was just
It's a bad movie.
Bad.
It's not funny.
I would say that's really the cardinal sin of any comedy. It's not just that it's dumb, but if it's not funny, and it wasn't funny.
No, it's a bad movie.
That's one that, again, probably thought about walking out of, but it was like we couldn't believe it the whole time. We just kept thinking, the funny thing's got to be about to happen.
Yeah.
And it just never did.
Yeah. I was just curious. I've got a couple so I've got two different kind of categories. One is a movie that I went to see in the theater that I knew was going to be bad, and it was. I think this might get a laugh out of you. It is from the 90s. It is with Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dennis Rodman.
Double Team?
Double Team.
Yes.
I saw it in the theater. That was that was when the Chicago Bulls were just a national phenomenon, I guess.
Right. And
someone was like, Dennis Rodman, he needs to be in a movie. And I saw that movie in the theater. But it did have that. This is amazing to at one point they throw a grenade at Dennis Rodman and he uses a soda machine to block the explosion of the grenade. He's an even worse actor than you would expect.
Like he's so bad, you're like, Jean-Claude's pretty good.
Jean-Claude's carrying this movie. There's a CGI tiger that looks like it's a Nintendo game. It's just awful. And then a movie, this is actually really recently, a movie that I went to see that I was not thinking would be amazing, but I thought it was going to be good, and it was such an awful movie. I was shocked. Was Halloween Ends, the third movie of the David Gordon Green Halloween trilogy.
I didn't see it on the back of your disappointment.
Oh my
when
gosh.
you told me about it, I was like,
it was so bad. And that, like Double Team, you're going basically to make fun of it and everything. This one, it was like, I'm not saying the other two David Gordon Green Halloween movies were great. But I was like, okay, I'm invested. Like, I've watched them. I want to see it. I couldn't believe how bad that movie was. It was terrible.
Yeah. I feel like I'm on a pretty good run. I don't think I've been really just terribly disappointed in a movie in a while, but it's part of it. I've been so much more particular about.
Oh, I'm more selective about what I'll see.
I go see.
Your idea to do this podcast made me think like, well, I just really had no standards in high school. Yeah. As far as like movie like Double Team, like I went to see Double Team.
I can't tell you how many times my friends and I went to see the movie Rush Hour.
Yeah,
multiple times.
Yeah, it was a big deal at the time. Yeah. So your credit. But I remember when I was in high school, I saw the movie One Fine Day with George Clooney and Michelle Pfeiffer in the movie theater.
Movie. I'm just going to tell you that right now.
It is.
Again, I haven't seen it as a kid, but that was one that I laugh and think like, I don't know any kid my age that like was watching that on whatever it came on HBO or something, and I probably watched it like 3 or 4 times. Like, this is just a really good.
I saw it in the movie theater.
Yeah.
Like I thought maybe it didn't make me think my standards were so bad. I just thought, boy, I just did not have a lot going on in high school. So I would just go to the I've told people this a lot of times. I would just go to the theater and then just look up and it's like, okay, what's playing in the next 15 minutes? And I would just go see that movie, which I think is how I saw One Fine Day in the theater.
Yeah. You kind of answered this question already, but I was going to ask with movie theaters, if you remember the first movie that you saw by yourself, but you talked about your parents dropping you off to watch a movie by yourself. I was a little older by the time I watched a movie by myself in theaters. The first one I remember seeing by myself was X-Men 2. And honestly, that was sort of a mistake.
Yeah.
But because I was supposed to go with some friends on opening night. One showing was sold out. Mm-hmm. And so then there was a lot of discussion, are we going to buy tickets for a later one and come back? And I had bought my ticket and just said, I'm going to come see it if anyone does or doesn't. Maybe I'll see y'all, maybe I won't. Show back up. I was the only one who did it. So I went by myself. And I was like, you know what? This ain't bad. And it was the start of a beautiful thing of me going to see movies by myself.
I have been to a lot of... I still, to this day, once in a while, will see a movie by myself. I never had any embarrassment or anything about going to see a movie by myself.
Yeah.
It never bothered me. My desire to see a movie, if there was a movie I was looking forward to, I was going to see it regardless. It's kind of like you're saying, like, if you want to be here with me, great. If not, I will go watch this movie by myself. And I have no problem with that at all.
Yeah, it's honestly the way I am now. It's almost preferable because you go on your own time. There's nothing better than being in a theater that's almost empty.
Oh yeah,
I've been in a theater that's
empty
besides me. That's a wonderful experience.
Yeah. Do you remember what movie it was?
The most recent one I did like that, I think I was by myself when I saw The Fabelmans.
Oh wow!
And I could be wrong about that. Really, I'm going to feel really bad if I went with somebody like a friend on that one.
So, someone's listening to this right now and they're like, oh, I thought we had a good time.
I think I might have actually done that. Say that. I think it might have been just me and my friend were the only ones in there.
Yeah.
I was like this close to being the only person seeing Mad Max Fury Road in the theater myself.
Yeah.
And then like 2 or 3 other people came in, like one of those, like all the previews were over and everything else. And then a couple people came in, ruined my individual theater experience.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been in a theater by myself, which is really surprising considering
the number of attempts you've had.
The number of attempts I've had and the quality of some of the movies I've seen in the theater.
Yeah, I'm sure there's movies we could go to right now that we could be the only person in the theater.
Because everyone's at
Oppenheimer,
everybody's at Barbie.
Even Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
Like the fact that there are other movies out. Probably.
What is your... I'm turning the tables on you. I'm springing some questions on you. Do you have anything that sticks out to you as like this, not necessarily the greatest movie I've ever seen in theater, but this is just the greatest movie theater experience I've ever had? Does anything jump out at you?
So I have a couple answers for that. Again, it kind of comes in waves. I could probably actually go back to The Rock. Like I talked about being 11 years old and seeing that in a movie theater. The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers.
Yeah.
Went and saw that opening day. It came out on a Wednesday. It was an exam day for us at school, so we got out at noon. And I didn't have something like early in the day, so I went and stood in a line around the block to get tickets for me and a couple of my friends.
For later that night.
Came back and watched it in the afternoon, and then went to youth group that night. We walked into youth group, and I was just like, "You guys,
my life is different now.
Got to see this movie. I did not know they could the Battle of Helm's Deep was. I didn't know that could happen in movies.
Right.
It was unbelievable at the time.
Side note: you failed that exam because you were because you were just so focused on watching Lord of the Rings, right?
Yeah, probably. Honestly,
I'm just kidding.
I didn't remember what exam I would have had.
Yeah.
But
so that's one that sticks out.
That's one that sticks out. And then both of the Avatar movies, and I'll say this: I've not watched either one since I saw them in theaters.
They are
I probably
incredible.
Never will.
Yeah.
But they are amazing cinematic achievements to watch in a theater.
It's an incredible movie theater experience to see those. Yeah. So those are your main ones.
Those are my ones that I would go to.
Nice. I've got two that really, really stick out. You might not like my first one. It's Avengers Endgame.
I mean, that's a
just the anticipation from Infinity War to Endgame, and the hype and everything that went into that. Really from Iron Man 1 to that, I kind of knew this is like the closing of this chapter at least, and with the expectations were unbelievable because Infinity War did such a great job with the cliffhanger and the snap. And again, it wasn't just about the movie; it was just the whole culmination, and just the environment that night. We saw it in the IMAX on opening night. There was literally 30 of us, but a bunch of friends went and my kids and everything, and it was an unbelievable experience. And then last fall, my favorite movie of all time is Jaws, which I hope we'll talk about one day in length, and that showed at the IMAX theater. So I was able to go, my wife, my kids, a bunch of my kids' friends came. So it was me, my wife, some of our friends, and then this 10 or 12 teenagers. And I was so excited to watch my favorite movie in the IMAX, but I was so excited. I was watching the movie, but the whole time I was kind of looking over at all these teenagers because I wanted to see if that movie was capturing their attention, and if they, I didn't expect anybody to love it as much as I do, but that was an amazing movie experience for me. To see my favorite movie up on the IMAX, and Jaws is an amazing movie to watch on a big screen. And then to kind of watch it through the eyes of my kids and their friends in that age group, it was incredible.
Yeah, I've had the experience of going to see Jaws on just a regular theater screen with you once before. And you're right. It's great to watch it on a real theater screen. And I wish they would do more of that, cycling through older movies and throwing them in theaters to go see. They did do it recently with The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
I went and saw The Two Towers and Return of the King in consecutive years with some friends.
Yeah.
And it was fun to...
I'm going to tell you, they'll get my money every time. If they just start throwing classics, especially up on the IMAX, they've got my money.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, they don't even have to go all the way back to 70s and 80s for classics.
No.
Throw The Dark Knight back in theaters.
Oh, I would be there in a second.
I bet you plenty of people would come and
I would be there in a second. Yeah. Also, this is not necessarily a question I'm springing on you, but this whole thing just got me thinking of how thankful I am for years of movie attendance. And I was just thinking, you see a movie. I guess I was just thinking, boy, you see all these movies in the theater, over a lifetime. And I look back and I saw, Home Alone in the theater I saw, which is not necessarily one of my favorite movies. But then it later goes on to become this holiday classic. And I was like, oh, it's kind of neat that I saw it in the theater. I saw Titanic in the theater, which became this cultural phenomenon and kind of launched Leo into this whole new level. It's cool that I got to see the Avatar is a good example. It's I'm just glad I saw that in the theater.
Yeah.
It's neat that you can look back. I saw the original Scream in the theater. Opening night, when there was, it wasn't a franchise, of course. Nobody knew that was going to be anything. And I just liked horror movies and never had dates. So I was like, I'll go see Scream. And then it grows into this big thing. And now I see people on social media who are much younger than I am, and they're like, it's a horror classic, and it's this movie that's looked at in a great light now. And I'm like, oh, I saw that in the theater. So I love just revisiting like these cool movie theater experiences that I've had over the years.
All right, so final question. What you just said led me to this. Do you remember the first movie you saw in theaters on a date?
Well, Jeremy, let me tell you something, my friend. When you have as few dates as I had in high school, it's really easy to remember this. So it's really weird that if you're a movie nerd and you're super into like Scorsese's use of slow motion, you don't seem to get a lot of dates. The two things did not seem to merge well together.
The world's a broken place, Andy.
It's terrible. It should have led into a lot of dates, didn't it? So yeah, I do remember in high school, I remember going to see Scream 2 with a girl. I do remember that. And yeah, I think that might be it. And
was there another date with that girl?
I don't think so, because I probably was on the way home explaining to her, the cool camera work or the history of Wes Craven or something, and she was probably like, okay, that's it for that. Yeah, I mean, really, I'm not trying to hide anything. I just didn't have a lot of dates, Jeremy. It was a lonely time. How about yourself?
I would say I get it. I don't even know if it was a date. But
which is a good sign that maybe it wasn't going well.
Right off the bat, the first movie I ever saw in theaters with a girl, though, was the Mummy Returns.
Oh, okay.
And fun fact about that, it was the opening weekend of it. I saw it the night before with friends, then talked to this girl about going to see a movie, and there was like nothing else really showing, and she was like, I was like, oh, I saw that last night. She's like, oh, and I was like, I'll go see it again.
You were like, the CGI is so good in this movie.
Frankly,
on the Scorpion King.
I was okay seeing it again because that's just what I did. Yeah. But also I was like, 100%, if this girl was to go, like, there's no chance I'm saying not. So I went and saw The Mummy Returns with a girl. So
Misty, my wife, who I'm married to now, our first movie that we went to, we technically weren't even dating, was the original Mummy in 1990. Not the 1930 original Mummy. I'm not that old. The 1999 Mummy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a very short list, Jeremy, of movies that I saw with girls.
Yeah.
Scream 2, I think, is the list. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't have many more.
Which is probably why we're sitting here right now doing a movie podcast together.
And I've got to be honest with you, worth it.
Completely worth it. Listen, that would have just been a distraction. I was going and I was learning about movies and I was absorbing those movies, and I have no regrets.
Yeah, and frankly, you're welcome, audience. We did this so that one day you could enjoy all of our wisdom.
We suffered. We endured loneliness in high school so that we would have all this knowledge to be able to spout out what year One Fine Day came out in the movie theater. Yes. And we would know that.
Yes. Well, thank you everybody for joining us for episode 3.
I'm still mad that I didn't immediately answer John Williams about your movie question. Can you re-edit that some way to make it sound like I just immediately said that?
I could.
Because I just
can't.
But I
won't. I'm actually going to draw it out longer. I'm going to cut out that you ever said John Williams.
I just can't believe that didn't pop into my mind immediately.
Yeah. That's all right.
Okay, this
we
was fun.
We also talked a lot about directors and never mentioned like Spielberg.
We did. I know. And, well, I will say, just really, really quickly, I said Scorsese is my favorite. Spielberg close second. Yeah. All right. But this was a lot of fun.
It was fun. All right. We'll see you guys all again next time.
Next time. All right.